I'll be real with you guys. I don't even know how to start this video. I don't even know if I should be talking about GPT-5 still, but I'm getting a ton of questions. I've spent the last couple weeks trying to figure out what went wrong and what we can do to fix it, and just generally trying to get the experience I had for those first few weeks when I had early access to GPT-5. The model is incredible, and it is still the model that I use for my work every day. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean everything else is irrelevant, and it certainly doesn't mean it's as good as it was when I was trying it before. But I think the reasons why are a lot more nuanced than people are giving credit. Did I have a special checkpoint that's no longer available? Was I getting access to custom tools or a special boosted version of ChatGPT? Were they secretly giving me GPT-5 Pro the whole time? There's a bunch of questions and speculation, and I've done my best to try and figure out the truth about all of this, and also generally analyze everything that went wrong. I also found this awesome blog post from LessWrong, the reverse DeepSeek moment. And I have so much here I want to share and talk about. From what went wrong and why the perception was so bad, to where is this magically good model hiding somewhere online. There's a lot to dive into here, and I want to do my best to try and be transparent about what I know, what I found, and everything I've been told by every party involved. This has been a lot more chaotic than I ever could have imagined, but I do think the actual problems are quite a bit simpler than we might be giving them credit. All of that said, I'm no longer getting free access to any of this stuff, and I've spent honestly far too much money testing it all. And since I'm not the one editing this video, thank you, FaZe, for taking over again. We got bills to pay. Quick word from them, and then we'll get started. There have been a lot of new models recently, and they all claim to be really good at tool calling and code, but it's kind of hard to verify that, much less get it running in your real code bases, unless you're using today's sponsor, THEOKILO Code. These guys are killing it. They built an open source all-in-one agent for VS Code. It has everything you need from orchestration and architecture help to actually writing code, of course, but also debugging, which is a surprisingly useful feature I've found myself playing with a lot. More importantly, though, they support every model, and I mean it. I used them for testing all the weird drops that were happening on OpenRouter, but you can use it for so much more. If you've been having problems using GPT-5, which I know a lot of us have been, it works really well in Kilo. They don't charge any premiums on the tokens that you use, so you're paying the cost you would directly through the API. Obviously, you can bring your own API keys if you want as well, but that means they can be super transparent in the UI of how much context is being used for each of your requests. How nice is it that it tells you what each request actually costs to process too, though? It's really good for hopping between different models and seeing what does and doesn't work, because you just get all of the information. It doesn't hide these things from you. It really does feel like these guys want you to have full clarity into what the coding agents are doing. Right now I have it generating my image studio demo using a vanilla Next.js setup. Should be a pretty good example. When you give GPT-5 the right tools to write code, the results are stunning, and Kilo's clearly providing those correct tools. I am blown away with how this came out, and if you want to see the magic yourself, check them out today at soidev.link/kilo. By the way, they gave me a code that gets you another $13.37 of credit. Make sure that you use that. That's a lot of inference for free. I'm very excited to dive into this article with you guys, but I want to start somewhere slightly different. What went wrong? Let's actually start with all of the questions that I keep getting asked, so we have them all in one place. Did I have a special version is the most common one. Was this version boosted in some way? Is the public version handicapped? Was I actually using GPT-5 Pro? Is the snapshot of the model I used gone forever? There's a lot of flavors of this question. The core thing being, people seem to believe that what I was using during the testing is fundamentally different from what you are using as a user. I have come to the conclusion it is not that simple, to put it very lightly. For full transparency, I want to show you guys what I was using when I was using the model early. When I was testing, the majority of my testing was done on this particular snapshot. GPT-5 Reasoning Alpha New Reasoning Effort 2025-07-25. So a lot of my testing was on this snapshot. But there was a slightly different version that had sysprompt put in the slug. The reason for that is that the sysprompt piece indicated that this was the special version with a custom system prompt that OpenAI wrote specifically for Cursor, because there was a lot of collab in a lot of weird ways going on between Cursor and OpenAI, because on one hand, they had to try and make it so the model would work well in Cursor, but on the other hand, they had to try and make it not clear that GPT-5 was available in quotes, in Cursor. And even if you tried using it, you wouldn't be able to. You had to hit the API directly through OpenAI. So I had to bring my own key for all of this. When I turn on the OpenAI API key, then I could access the GPT-5 models that we had access to. The Reasoning Alpha New Reasoning version was the general GPT-5 we recommended to use over the API, but if we were working in Cursor specifically, we were told to use this image instead. This snapshot is the one that I was using in Cursor. To be clear, These are both the exact same model. The difference was that this API endpoint had a system prompt inserted into it that forced it to behave a specific way. It is also of note that the GPT-5 endpoint did not accept a lot of parameters like temperature, so you couldn't really configure how it behaved with a bunch of those random magic variables. I already see people speculating about that. The GPT-5 Reasoning Alpha sysprompt version is what I did the majority of my coding in when I was using Cursor with GPT-5 before the launch, and that was what I had the crazy experience that resulted in that first video with. So that solves it, right? This magic version of the model that I was using is really good and smart and capable, and the version everybody else is using is dumb and wrong in a different snapshot that's gimped and intentionally handicapped because they don't want to give the best to everyone. Obviously, right? Not that simple. The reason that this special slug existed was because of all the back and forth going on between Cursor and OpenAI in order to implement things. When you have something like this, where the two parts are so separate from each other, where OpenAI has a bunch of layers of obfuscation for their new model that they haven't put out officially yet, and Cursor has to implement features to make that model work well without showing that they have this and that this thing exists. That resulted in a lot of friction, that resulted in a lot of different parts being shoved in different places. Some parts were being shoved into the GPT-5 endpoints to fix the system prompt. Other parts were being shoved into the editor with custom prefixes. There was a fun moment where I was so scared of leaking, I really wanted to have access to a different version of this, it was called Nectarine Alpha New Reasoning Effort 0725. This and this were the exact same model, the exact same endpoint, just different strings that point to the same thing. I wanted to be able to use the Nectarine version in Cursor because I wanted to hide the fact that I was using GPT-5 and lower the likelihood I would accidentally leak that when I was streaming. The reason I couldn't was hilarious. They had custom prefixed GPT-5 to have the new behaviors in Cursor, and they hadn't done a custom prefix for Nectarine with the same thing. So you can see in Cursor, when I go to select the model, it has the little brain icon. That's because it's using the max mode, which is a feature in Cursor that it knows what the model's capable of. When I put in Nectarine, it wouldn't have that, so I couldn't use that version in Cursor at all. So I was using the GPT-5 Reasoning Alpha sysprompt new reasoning effort for the vast majority of my testing inside of Cursor. I did switch to this for a bit, and I didn't use it enough to have a really strong opinion on how it differed from the sysprompt version. But again, these are the same model. This one just has a custom endpoint that has a different system prompt being inserted. All three of these are the exact same model. This and this are different endpoints for the same model that returns the exact same thing, and this adds a system prompt but is effectively the same otherwise. Here is where things get really fun. There's one other model that is the exact same as all of these, GPT-5. This is the exact snapshot that they released. They have no reason to lie about this, and I've been able to verify it to the best of my ability externally as well, because OpenAI was kind enough to reopen the GPT-5 reasoning effort version for me to use. So I spent the last week no-lifing this, testing this endpoint against the standard GPT-5, and they behave almost identically. At first, I was confused, though, because of a thing that a lot of people have been assuming, which is that when I was using this, obviously, this is the equivalent of GPT-5 high fast. Duh. Obviously, I was using the smartest version. Obviously, OpenAI has us using the smartest version. Nope. It turns out, and this was a fun thing to learn through this debugging and also talking to OpenAI, crazy what happens when you actually talk to the people, this is the equivalent of standard GPT-5. Not the fast version, although it was effectively the fast version because I'm an entirely different queue. But more importantly, it's not the high version. I was not using the high reasoning effort, high juice version of GPT-5 at any point during any of my testing. The first time I got to try GPT-5 high was the day that GPT-5 came out. This was a big surprise to me because I even had fallen for this, that I just blindly assumed the thing we were testing in Cursor, it must be high. There's no other reason that that version would be smarter and this version would be dumber. But that's another one of the hot takes that I've been developing. The GPT-5 in Cursor today is not dumber than the one I used. It just sucks more when using it. We need to talk about Grok 4. You guys have seen my video on Grok 4. We've all seen the benchmarks from Grok 4. It's one of the smartest models ever made. It regularly outperforms almost everything else on every benchmark. It is clearly one of the smartest models ever made. And I avoid using it entirely. Not just because it's super expensive, not just because it's super slow. Those are enough of reasons in and of themselves. But the main reason I don't use Grok 4 is because it sucks to work with. What I mean by that is it tries to go 200 IQ on everything. It loves to overthink basic stuff like, what skateboard trick is this? It'll literally generate 10,000 tokens when asked to name a skateboard trick, when other models will do like 15. The fact that it is so smart almost works as a detriment to it, because it tries to 200 IQ everything. It tries to overthink everything, and it takes forever to actually do the tool call that supposedly it was trained on. And it also, because it was trained on tool calls, will hallucinate them all the time. I cannot tell you how many times we've seen Grok 4 dump fake syntax for doing a search in a chat response because it's ignoring the actual search tool we've provided it. Because Grok 4 was trained so aggressively on all these different things, it actually kind of sucks. I would never have predicted that would be the case, but it is. It is an interesting realization to have, because that's kind of what's happening with GPT-5 right now. Since the model behaves so differently from others, not in the sense that it's like really weird and quirky, honestly kind of the opposite. It's much less so than other models. It does what you tell it for the most part. Because of that, a lot of the tools that are built to kind of sandbox the models to not touch things they're not supposed to and to guide them really carefully with the right tools, those things don't work as well with GPT-5. And a lot of the existing tools have not been very good when plugged into GPT-5. Some amount of this is the new Harmony response format standard. Some amount of this is because we built everything around what Claude wants. And some amount of it is just incompetence and weirdness and GPT-5 being a strange model to work with. But the state it was in when I tried it was admittedly a bit buggy, but was really good when it was good. And little things like its willingness to use a to-do list was quite nice. I have not seen GPT-5 use the to-do list since my early testing. And that kind of frustrates me because it was a good experience and that's not available anymore. But this is just touching on the problem because a lot of people who didn't use Cursor had a really bad experience with GPT-5 as well. Let's say this is the model. We don't know if it's good, bad, or else. We just have this thing that exists. How do we use it? You can hit the API directly and get a response, but the harsh reality is that almost nobody does that. The way most people experience GPT-5 is through another layer. Those layers can be things that we're all familiar with. Could be something like ChatGPT.com, could be something like T3 Chat, or it could be something like an AI code tool, the one that most of us will be using, Cursor. So if we are hitting these layers, we're not hitting the model directly. We are going through ChatGPT.com, going to the model through that, and then getting a response that way. Or we're hitting T3 Chat, or we're hitting Cursor. When someone sees a new model drop, they don't rush to go hit the API and run benchmarks against it. That's what nerds like me do, and when we did that, it was really impressive. GPT-5 still benches exactly the same as it did when I was testing it early. The difference here is that when I'm testing it ahead of time, I am throwing it through whatever I can, seeing how it performs, seeing how it behaves, and I'm also using both ChatGPT.com and Cursor in a different state than they'll be in once they come out. Because when I was testing it, these parts were still very early. They were figuring out the auto router. And honestly, the little bit of testing I did on ChatGPT.com with GPT-5 was not very good, and I stopped using it almost immediately. But my experience in Cursor was pretty good. So most of my time using GPT-5 was hitting the endpoints for benchmarking and testing and using it in Cursor. I didn't plug it into T3 Chat because I didn't want to leak the fact that I had early access. So I was almost entirely using this for coding and agentic work and benchmarking tools. I was not using it as my daily chat model. I did go to ChatGPT.com and ask it some hard questions and get surprisingly decent answers here and there. But whenever it used the canvas, everything fell apart. Supposedly they fixed most of that. I was not having a great experience on the website overall, though. Some amount of that's because the ChatGPT site's kind of trash. Some amount of that is because the auto router is weird. Some amount of that is because they didn't have the reasoning model as the default version on the website. There's a lot of reasons. But I was having a very good experience on this side. And now that we've shipped it in T3 Chat, a lot of people are saying that they didn't realize how good the model was until they tried it in T3 Chat because we don't have it gimped at all. We don't have an auto router. You pick which version of GPT-5 you're using. But this is where the problem comes. As much as I love T3 Chat and as big as it is not one of the biggest sources of use for new AI models. It's surprisingly big. Like if we go to OpenRouter, look at my favorite model, Grok 4, you'll see that we're one of the top users of Grok 4. We're almost as big of a Grok 4 user as the OpenRouter test chat room. Pretty nuts how big Grok 4 use is on T3 Chat. Big part of why it's such an expensive service to run. The point I'm trying to make here is that we do a lot of throughput, but it's nothing in comparison to where most people live. And this is also for a relatively obscure and not actually nice to use model, Grok 4. So not necessarily numbers that mean much. Being fourth place on an obscure model through a wrapper layer like OpenRouter shows that we are not the popular way to use GPT-5. So the vast majority of people, especially the people who are on Twitter, the developers who are shitposting and have strong thoughts about this, these are the two surfaces that they went through. And the problem with layers like this is one of the most classic sayings in the history of time: a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. It does not matter how good the GPT-5 model is if the layers that people are accessing them through are garbage. And this is why I think GPT-5 had such a rough rollout. I don't actually think much of it had to do with the GPT-5 models at all. I think the vast majority of what made this rollout suck is the ChatGPT site being absolute fucking garbage and the auto router being a terrible experience. They even admitted that for the first couple of days, the auto router was failing and sending every request to the scoped down, reasoning free version and just getting shit answers as a result. And that lines up with what I was seeing people posting, especially in comparison to T3 chat, where we were hitting the API directly. Yeah. This is a post from Sam Altman on Reddit when they did an AMA about the new models. GPT-5 will seem smarter starting today. Yesterday we had a SEV, which is an outage, an incident, and the auto switcher was out of commission for a chunk of the day, and the result was that GPT-5 seemed way dumber. I think it was more than that. I think that the reason it went down is that they were trying to fix it because they realized how bad it was performing, and that resulted in bad experiences for a lot of people trying it. And I can fully sympathize with why most people who go through this would assume the model's bad. You see a bunch of people talking about how incredible and magical this model is. You see that they're in this launch video about the new model. You go to try it yourself. So you go to chatgpt.com and you try it, and it gets the strawberry question wrong. You ask it how many R's are in strawberry, and it's incorrect, and you laugh. And you go try it in Cursor because everybody's saying it's good there. And then you try it there. It locks up a whole bunch, gives you a shit answer after 5 minutes. You decide everybody's hyping this thing, so they were paid to do it, and then you move on with your life. That makes a ton of sense to me, because you're not actually testing the model in any of those scenarios. You're testing the chatgpt.com implementation, and you're testing how Cursor has set up all of the tools, system prompts, and custom everything, as well as exposing all of this through the UI. And the way Cursor implements GPT-5 is frustrating. I'll say that at the very least. A problem I regularly run into when I use it, and let me just find a video where I have this quick. So here I was doing comparisons between 5 and the custom reasoning version. You can see it's a QuickTime video, so it's not the most easy to see thing in the world. But down here I had the GPT-5 reasoning, new reasoning effort piece, and here I had standard GPT-5. The response quality in the outputs was basically the same, but a bug that would happen on both. At first I thought it was just main GPT-5, but it happens in both. This isn't done yet. The bug is that when it's still going, and you see the stop button there, it's working. It's generating a file here. It's writing the tool call to edit the file, but Cursor doesn't indicate this in the UI anywhere. So it feels like it just froze. These little details of UX result in the experience you have with GPT-5 feeling significantly worse. The actual using the model feels bad. And I still feel this now. It is very, very frustrating. When I'm trying to use GPT-5, I regularly think, oh, it must have frozen. And then see the stop button is still there. And I realize, oh, it's not frozen. They just don't have a UI state for when it's in this spot. All they have to do is put a little thing underneath the text here that says reasoning or generating to make the experience feel quite a bit better. But they're not doing that. And the result is that it feels bad. Compared to models like Claude 4 Sonnet or Opus, or even new stealth models like Sonic, the experience using them feels better because they generate token per token in a way that's a little more visible. But more importantly, the UI shows what they're doing at all times. Even if it shows silly things, like what I just found and ended up posting when I filmed my last video. I had Sonic building a benchmark tool just as a demo, and it thought for 6 seconds, and it thought the index. That's all it thought. This is silly and dumb, but at least you see it making progress, you see loading states, you see it working. GPT-5 takes way longer. It's not a fast model. It generates tokens quickly, but it also does a lot of work and will do a lot of chained tool calls and back and forth. So it takes longer to complete a task. It's way more likely to complete the task well, but it takes a long ass time to do it. And the UI has not caught up to that slowness. The cursor experience does not work well alongside GPT-5, and it's easy to feel like things are failing and crashing. And sometimes they do. I was having a problem where it would fail to use the edit tool over and over again. I ended up working with the guys over at Cursor, getting them some traces, and they're trying to fix it. They might have even fixed it by now. But all these little details added up to a lackluster experience. Some of these things were happening during my early testing. It felt like it was less common than it was after, but the result just wasn't great. And when you tried switching over to using GPT-5 High, it would be even slower, and these problems wouldn't go away. The thing I'm trying to highlight here is that the surfaces that we use to access the model, being the ChatGPT site and Cursor, result in the thing that we actually experience being worse than it would have been hitting it directly. One other significant portion of this is how receptive GPT-5 is to system prompts, because the model does what you tell it to do, nothing more, nothing less. It has some of the most impressive results on my benchmarks, in particular the benchmarks around things like snitch bench, where if you don't tell it to snitch, it won't snitch. If you tell it to act boldly and in the interest of humanity, it might snitch. But if you don't give it specific instructions to it, probably won't. And if you don't tell it to act boldly, you just give it a task, it does the task without hesitation. And when I ran it against the Anthropic benchmark for this, same deal. The model does what you tell it. It doesn't try to work around it. It doesn't touch things it shouldn't for the most part. It'll edit a README here and there. But beyond that, I'm regularly surprised that GPT-5 will sit there, think for 5 minutes, edit 2 files, total 5 lines of code, and solve the problem surprisingly well. But that doesn't feel great. It certainly doesn't feel like super intelligence. It actually feels pretty slow and bad UX-wise. I've never had a model where I'm spending more time doing other shit. This is the first model where I bothered relearning work trees so that I could have multiple tasks running in parallel because it's too slow to just sit there and wait for. So you go to chatgpt.com and you get a dumber model. You go to Cursor and you get a super slow model that fails tool calls and hangs all the time in the UI. What the fuck? Why would anyone use this? The harsh reality is just that the model's really good. If I've learned anything through all the time I put into this testing over the last week, is that the model is actually fucking incredible. I know it's controversial. People are going to call me a paid shill or whatever. After how hard I just shat on chatgpt.com, I hope you guys understand I am not being paid a fucking cent for any of this. The GPT-5 model is so good at various things. It's not like it's way smarter about hard code problems than Opus. It goes down weird tangents less often. It's way better at UI design. I've done a bunch of comparisons now. It is the best UI model ever. It just does Tailwind better. It does gradients more tastefully. When I give it a UI task, it makes something that looks and feels significantly better than any other model I've ever used, other than the Horizon models, which I, at this point, am pretty sure are the GPT-5 non-reasoning versions. The model is really good. And one of the funniest signals I have for this is that all the people I'm talking to at Cursor use GPT-5 as their daily driver still. Pretty much entire Cursor team, as far as I know, is still all in on GPT-5, even with these UX failures that I hope they're fixing really aggressively right now. They prefer this model. It would be funny when I would talk to my friends at Cursor and be like, yo, here's a list of the problems I'm having using Cursor with GPT-5. This is really frustrating. And the response from, I'll just say Eric, I remember the first time you responded to it was like, this is crazy because GPT-5 is still the model I choose every day. It feels so much better than Sonnet. And I thought about it and realized he's right. I do not like using Sonnet or Opus anymore. The UX is slightly better in the editor. So the way it does tool calls, the way it spins up the to-do list, the way it goes through tasks and completes them. Sonnet is absolutely a workhorse, and it's built well into lots of different things. There's a reason that it's the model that's used for almost all agentic work. But GPT-5 is better. I have not went back to a Claude model for anything other than testing, either to compare it with GPT-5 or to look into how it's doing tool calls and all of these types of things. It's something else I've been doing, and I've been doing this a lot. Whenever I have a problem that GPT-5 can't answer, I go to try it in Opus. And there's not been a single fucking time for me that Opus got even vaguely close to answering a thing that GPT-5 couldn't. That's fun. Allow ChatGPT to store data in persistent storage. Huh. Someone's trying to do more local first. Wonder what's up there. As you guys all probably heard, when GPT-5 dropped, I was in Vegas for DEF CON. The reason I go to DEF CON is this particular set of challenges called GoldBug that I'm addicted to. I'm not going to go too in-depth. You can watch my videos about it from last year, but the TLDR, we get a bunch of puzzles that can be solved in a varying set of ways. You have to find a 12-character phrase in each one, and the majority, actually I think the entirety of them are pirate-themed this particular year. The puzzle I spent most of my time on was this one, Smuggler's Manifest. The puzzle is this one PDF. This PDF says at the top, we know they smuggled the emerald out of the port, but how? It's meant to be a shipping log of items that went in and out of different ports, where they came from, where they're going to, how much they weigh, and a description of the item. And the expectation is that we go through this and find the hidden code somewhere in it. No one's going to try this, so I don't feel bad spoiling it. If you do, just skip till you don't see this on the screen anymore. The solution ended up being you have to realize that these IDs on the side are an ADFGX cipher, because there's a hint at the bottom. This is all the trade the Germans intercepted. Germans in World War I used this particular bad cipher, and we have to find the path the emerald took between different things, combine all of the IDs, then we have to find the key word that we can use to transpose it to then hopefully generate the right answer. This was chaos. In particular, finding the path was chaos. And I was trying to figure out all of the weight discrepancies that were likely the place where the emerald was being hidden. So one example is here, where there is a small carved box with a foam lining that's supposed to be 2.5 ounces, but it's weighing 2.6. This comes up 2 other times where it says 2.5 and it is 2.5. But this one particular place, it says 2.5 and it's actually 2.6. So that is a discrepancy. There are other suspicious ones too, like here, wrapped in banana leaves. It doesn't say what it is. It just says wrapped in banana leaves, and it weighs 7.2 ounces. Obviously, it's ounces because 2.5 ounces. It's pretty obvious that this column is ounces. There's no reason we don't even have to question that, right? Cool. I was tired of Google searching how much things weighed and doing comparisons, so I threw this at ChatGPT. What items in the manifest don't match their weights? Here it called out that these 3 IDs say the box is 2.5 ounces. Most of them weigh 2.5, but it does say here the listed weights read like pounds while the description says 2.5 ounces. Not the best response, but it said here it reads like pounds, but the description says that. Annoying. I could not get fucking Claude Opus to do anything other than misassume that it's supposed to be pounds. Like here, 2.5 ounces is 0.156, not 2.6. 2.5 ounces is not 2.5 pounds. It insisted on this point. These discrepancies suggest either data entry errors or potentially deliberate falsification of weights, possibly to hide contraband. It is assumed the weights are in ounces, not pounds. I don't know why you'd assume otherwise. You're absolutely right. I want to die. Not helpful at all. This is my experience with Opus. I'm not happy with the answer from ChatGPT. I try GPT-5 and I don't get a thing that I'm content with. I go back and I ask Claude. And by the way, I don't think it'll show it here. During this generation, it ran out of thinking budget and asked me to hit continue to let it keep going. I had such a bad I tried so hard to get useful info out of Opus for these puzzles, and it cannot help at all. Here is me playing with it in T3 chat using various models. I think this one, this was Claude 4 Sonnet reasoning, and it did better with figuring out that 2.5 and 2.6 don't line up. To be fair, I didn't give it the PDF. I gave it a JSON dump instead. But the funnier thing here is after it figured that all out, it just hallucinated the rest. It ignored the fact that the IDs are a cipher and concluded that one of the items was the secret. So the answer must be secret locket. It just hallucinated answers. This is probably my favorite difference. ChatGPT would help me with the things it thought. ChatGPT was what told me to look at the ADFGX cipher. ChatGPT was what told me that it was based on a specific movie, Romancing the Stone. ChatGPT helped me figure out pieces. It never tried to give me the answer. It tried generating code to calculate the answer and it failed every time. But at least it gave me the pieces I needed to figure things out. Anthropic will say something obvious and then hallucinate an answer. Almost every time I tried a fucking Anthropic model to help me with this, it would just delusionally make up answers. Or even better, when I did it through their website, it would write code, run it, get no answer, lie, and then hallucinate an answer. So here it made an interactive artifact to run code to try and decrypt the hidden thing. Because at this point I was just telling it, it's an ADFGX cipher, it's referencing this movie, the 12-character string with no whatever else. Write me code to solve this. created the JavaScript, called out suspicious items. What's really funny is the hollow pendant wasn't the item because the emerald weighs too much for it to have weighed that little there. And then after doing the ADFGX cipher code, it didn't run the code. It just came up with a bunch of potential answers. The most likely answer, given the context, is probably emerald stone. No, it fucking wasn't. This has been my experience using Claude. It almost starts down a semi-correct path and then hallucinates its way to hell. In contrast, here is me handing a different puzzle, admittedly, to ChatGPT on the ChatGPT site. I was using Pro because I was just curious. I had not used Pro at all up until this point. It reasoned for 15 minutes and it went kind of ham. It wrote a bunch of code. It did its best to try and solve the puzzle, but it also, once it ran the code, it got nonsense text and it realized that that's not the solution, but also would do this randomly. It would just say thought and then not finish the work it was doing. This is the key difference. It gives us observations. The bottles are numbered in reverse order because it would go scan the page. The shanty pattern repeats. 3 swigs ahead, 4 cups, possibly take every 4th bottle, move 3 bottles forward in the lineup. It has theories. Likely mechanism. This feels a lot like the Josephus problem. Start a given bottle, skip forward 3 steps. It gave real useful information. And instead of hallucinating an answer, it offered to write JS code to try and solve the problem. And to be clear, neither of these answered it. But I almost think that's what makes it more interesting. Neither knew the answer because this is a novel and very difficult problem. But ChatGPT and GPT-5 would give me useful pieces to work towards it, not make shit up, and would ask me if I should proceed with a theory that it proposes. Whereas with Claude, it will almost start being a little bit right, quickly ignore the context I gave it, go down some absolutely chaotic path, write a bunch of code, not use the code, and then hallucinate an answer. This is my experience. So I'm sure that the Claude models are better for something. I still think they're better at like personality. Like if I'm trying to talk through a personal problem with a model, which you shouldn't do, but let's be real, we all occasionally do it. I find the Anthropic models are nicer to talk to about like relationship troubles and shit like that. The ChatGPT models actually get work done for me now. And once again, to be clear, that was not the case before. There was no other OpenAI model that was useful for me for work in that way. And to be very, very clear, this is not how I felt about any previous OpenAI model. They were not good enough at tool calls. They were not good enough at doing things in steps. They were good at thinking and coming up with an answer that seemed right. But this much more deliberate behavior is a thing that I find is very new and very nice with GPT-5. And even then, the ChatGPT site was kind of annoying. I was picking Pro mostly to keep it from being auto-routed out of the smart models and towards the dumber versions. I found so many bugs on the ChatGPT site when I was doing this set of puzzles. It was hilarious. It was also just a generally good way to test the different models and the different endpoints and a lot of different things. I probably wrote 5,000 lines of code in Cursor throughout these challenges. One of these puzzles we spent a lot of time on, a single gold coin. It had a really jank 3JS viewer by default, like really jank. And I rewrote it to make it easier to see. And my rewritten version was like I know my way around React 3 Fiber and 3JS. I don't remember all the specific like camera techniques that I need to use and shit. So I vibe coded a lot of it with basic prompting, like go in this direction, make these changes, don't touch this, it's fine. And after like 20 to 30 minutes of vibe coding can make something that looks and works pretty damn well. I'm actually very happy with how this came out, especially in comparison with the original, which I don't have the link for anymore. But they liked mine so much that now it is the official one. When you click the link on the Crypto Village site, it brings you to my solution. It's not really a solution, it's a new viewer, but I was really proud of that fact and that I could vibe code that out with GPT-5 in 20 minutes while in parallel solving other problems. I bring all of this up not because the ultimate way to test a model is by doing really obscure puzzles at DEF CON. I bring this up because I'm trying to showcase my lived experience and how different it is from how I see others describing the new models. And again, to be clear, it didn't solve the problem in any of these scenarios, but it helped a ton with me getting towards the answer. And that is not an experience that I'd had before. I never felt like a model was a coworker in that way. I can't tell you how many times when I'm pairing, I'm going back and forth with a person writing code, and neither of us are right. Neither of us know the solution, but we're iterating on each other until a solution comes out. And this model can do that. I haven't even touched this article yet. I want to go through this quick, though, because I'm excited to see how others feel. Everyone agrees the release of GPT-5 was botched. Everyone can also agree that the direct jump from 4.0 and O3 to 5 was not of similar size as the jump from GPT-3 to GPT-4. Okay, from O3 to GPT-5, I agree, but from 4.0 to 5, I heavily disagree. GPT-4.0 was a garbage model, and I'm so happy it's effectively dead now. GPT-5 represented the release of at least 3 distinct models: 5 Fast, 5 Thinking, and 5 Pro. And at least 2 or likely all 3 of these are state-of-the-art within their classes, along with the GPT-5 Auto. To be fair, GPT-5 Auto is not a thing on the API, it's just a thing in the app. I would not measure that for much of anything. Problem is that the release was so botched that OpenAI is now experiencing a reverse DeepSeek moment. All the forces that cause us to overreact to R1 are now working against OpenAI in reverse. This threatens to give DC and its key decision makers a false impression of a lack of AI progress, especially progress towards AGI, which could lead to some very poor decisions. In January, when R1 came out from DeepSeek, we had the DeepSeek moment where everyone panicked that China had caught up. R1 was a good model, but only an ordinary good model, substantially behind the frontier still. We had the DeepSeek moment because of a confluence of factors that misled people. The $6 million model narrative gave a false impression on cost. They offered a good, clean app with visible chain of thought. It helped, but not as much as people seem to think. The new style caused an overestimate of model quality. That I agree with. I still think V3 was better than R1. The timing was impeccable, both in order of model releases and within the tech tree, yes. Safety testing and other steps were skipped, leaving various flaws, and this was a pure fast follow, but in our haste, no one took any of that into account. There was a false impression of momentum in stories about Chinese momentum. The always insist on open models win thing definitely amplified it. And the stock market was highly lacking in situational awareness, suddenly realizing various known facts and also misunderstanding many important factors. Now 5 is having the opposite. It's evaluated as if it was scaling up compute in a way that it doesn't. GPT-5 definitely cost a lot of money to make, but it didn't necessarily cost significantly more. Offered a poor initial experience with rate caps and lost models and missing features, a broken router, complaints about losing 4.0. Yep. The new style and people evaluating 5 when they should have been evaluating 5 thinking caused an underestimate of model quality. Again, the web app hurt them a ton. The timing was directly after Anthropic, and the previous releases had already eaten the most impressive recent parts of the tech tree, so gains incorrectly look small. In particular, gains from a reasoning model and from 4 to 4.0 are being ignored when considering the 4 to 5 leap. Yep, GPT-5 is a refinement of previous models optimized for efficiency and is breaking new territory, and that is not being taken into account. I agree here in particular. GPT-5 isn't great because it's so much smarter. It's great because they refined a lot of bullshit out of other models, and it behaves much better. False impression of hype in a story about a loss of momentum. Yep. OpenAI's flailing crowd. And the stock market was smart and shrugged it off. Unlike R1, 5 Thinking and 5 Pro are clearly the current state-of-the-art models of their classes. And 5 Auto is probably state-of-the-art at the level of compute that it uses. We don't know because they hide the compute usage, but yeah. OpenAI's model usage was way up after 5's release, not down. The release was botched, but this is a very obviously good set of models. Apparently, DC is assuming that it is a failure and that AGI is no longer a worry. Tons of people who barely use AI are asking me about the past week as their AI policy friend. I don't think 5 was a failure. Person tells me they aren't allowed to use LLM-Y at job, ABC, because regulatory considerations. So they use LLM-Z at home because that's what they started to use first, and they don't have much experience with a different one. So what happens when another lab releases a model that surpasses 5? Narrative can quickly change from AI is hitting a wall to OpenAI has lost the mandate of heaven and it's now shifted to one of these other places. It's a very valuable time for someone else to drop a model. Absolutely. Even if a new model performs slightly worse than 5, the amount of positive press the next model drop's going to have is going to be insane. The thing that makes me think we actually might be approaching AGI, I don't like the term, I don't like the phrasing, I don't like talking about this even. This is the bench I think about. This is how long can an LLM work before it has a higher than 50% failure rate. And GPT-5 is capable of going for over 2 hours before it starts to hit a higher than 50% chance failure rate. That is very impressive. That is what's changing now, is how long can it work for before it hits hard walls and a human has to come in and steer it in the right direction again. GPT-5 has hit groundbreakingly high numbers here. This is the chart that in many ways shows the actual progress we're making as a field, not some benchmark on how smart it is, how close it can get to 100%. You're like, where's Gemini? Here, which lines up for me. Gemini 2.5 Pro does not run for a long time very well. It's also really fast, which hurts its numbers here because it like generates tokens quicker. If you were to measure how many tokens can it generate until it fails, 2.5 Pro would probably look a lot better. But how long can it work independently for? That's the question. And then other silly things like this wonderful one. GPT-5 was able to complete Pokemon Red with 33% of the steps that other models had when doing it. 18,000 steps is what it took for O3 to complete Pokemon Red. GPT-5 did it in 6,500. Actual work is the magic thing. And this is a pretty good question from Finger. I don't get the time thing. Why does it matter? It's just more data, not necessarily smarter. This matters a ton because it's how much work can you get done. Imagine you have two engineers. They are roughly as intelligent as each other. One of them can work for 15 minutes before having a 50% chance they fuck up. And one of them can work for 2.5 hours before they have a 50% chance of fucking up. One of those engineers is a significantly better engineer. It doesn't matter if they are the same intelligence or if you gave them a test, they would get the same number of answers correct. The one that can independently work for longer is obviously the better engineer. And the examples they have on the side here make a lot of sense too. For these shorter term models, they can find information on the web. For something that can run for an hour, it now can do something like train a classifier. As it gets more, it can now probably fix bugs in small Python libraries agentically behind the scenes. This is where like Claude Code and stuff come in. As you break the hour 30 mark, now you can go scrape records from websites that have anti-bot protection and collect the data and do things with it. And once you break the 2-hour mark, you can start exploiting libraries. Like if there's a buffer overflow in some random lib, you can tell that to the model and it can go experiment for 2+ hours by itself and figure things out. That's the difference. It doesn't matter who's more or less smart. A really smart person who can only work for 10 minutes and a pretty smart person who can work for 3 hours, that's the key. It's task duration for humans, to be clear, but this is more how long can it work independently for. The length of tasks that AI can do is doubling every 7 months. This is the magic chart. The progress we're making here in particular is nuts. And when you compare that to a chart like this, it doesn't look very impressive. Like, oh, Gemini 2.5 Pro did a really good score on this set of benchmarks. GPT-5 High isn't that much higher. Oh, I guess we're stalling out. Not that simple. Oh, all of these are different links. That's hilarious. These are all links about how we're hitting a wall with GPT-5, and they're very dumb. People complaining the vibes aren't good, which means the model's bad. People expected something totally new, said Thomas Wolfe, co-founder and chief scientist at Hugging Face. And here we didn't have that. True, we didn't get something totally new. But again, that was OpenAI botching the rollout, using the name GPT-5, and having made many incremental releases since 4, like 4.0, 01, and 03. They hit the classic notes. This whole article is really good. I recommend reading the whole thing, but this part in particular is key. OpenAI rightfully thinks of itself as essentially multiple companies. They are an AI frontier research lab, but also a consumer product company and a corporate or professional product company as well. They're looking to be a hardware company at this point too. Most of the customers want to pay $0, at least until you make yourself indispensable. Most of the rest are willing to pay up to $20 a month, and they're not interested in paying more. You want to keep control over this consumer market at Kleenex or Google levels of dominance, and you want to turn a profit. So they are prioritizing making things like the auto model and auto router cheap and smart for the price instead of the smartest possible thing. It may not have been OpenAI's intentions, but with the launch of GPT-5 is making clear is that the nature of the AI race has changed. Instead of merely building shiny, bigger models, a researcher said that AI companies are slowly coming to terms with the fact that they're building infra for products. Yes, this is key. For everybody who's been mad at me for how I talk shit at Grok, that's because they're not doing this part. They're not building useful tools for us to build around. The thing I'm about to say is going to probably hurt me and my business. There is not much room for innovation left in chat apps. Models getting way smarter doesn't meaningfully improve the experience you have on T3 Chat or ChatGPT.com. They're already really good. Maybe it gets a hard question right slightly more often, but that's not a massive improvement. The thing that's changing is how complex of tasks and how long of tasks these models are able to complete themselves. That's a huge change, and that's not one you're going to see on a random chat app. And thankfully, a lot of companies are realizing this, and they're working on the infra side more and more now. Google just put out the ability to hand a link to a model, either in the chat app or even more importantly, over the API, and it will be able to go search the web page, scan it, bring it into context, and use it. That's awesome. That is infra. That is solutions to problems we have as we build using these tools. That's where the real battlefront's going to be, is the layer between the model and the rest of the fucking world. It makes sense that as AI gets applied in a lot of useful ways, people would focus more on the applications versus the more abstract ideas like AGI. There's a key point in this article that honestly might end up being a video of its own someday. I don't want to harp on it too much now, but this does have a chance of massively screwing things up because it could fool the government into ignoring the possibility of AGI actually happening. Analysts say that with AGI no longer considered a risk, Washington's focus has switched to ensure that US-made AI chips and models rule the world. OpenAI badly messes up the Vibe around the 5 launch, and then eventually, US gives up on export controls to China. Yeah. I think that covers everything I have to say here. This was quite an article. This has been quite a drama. The points I wanted to emphasize are that the model I was using is the same as what you're using now. It is the medium reasoning version of GPT-5 over the API. All the different stuff I tested were snapshots of that. And the main ones I used, which were these 3, they are the exact same snapshot that you use today over the API. The problem is that nobody uses the API. They use surfaces like ChatGPT and Cursor that made the experience feel much worse for various reasons. OpenAI fucked this up with the ChatGPT side. They screwed up really bad with how the router rolled out and how they deprecated old models, which made it feel awful. That is their fault. They need to own that. But also, Cursor made a bunch of last-minute changes trying to make the experience for ChatGPT and GPT-5 in Cursor better and failed. And there's a lot of UX failures in Cursor's implementation right now that are still pervasive. I ran into one earlier when I was testing it, like today. But despite all of that, I still think 5 is an incredible model. It's still the one I use for all the work I do. It's still the one I talk to in T3 chat. Okay, I use 5 mini quite a bit more because it's really, really good and insanely cheap. And honestly, I might have to do one more GPT-5 video, but not about GPT-5, because 5 mini and Nano are criminally underrated models. They are so insanely good for the money that I'm amazed people aren't talking about it more. And if you think that's interesting, let me know, and that'll be my next video. Hope this was useful to all of you guys. Sorry again for all the drama. I hope you understand that I am trying my best to be as transparent as possible about all of this chaos. I don't have that much more info than you guys, and I'm doing my best to share the little bit I know and have. Hopefully this helps you better understand what went wrong and why the perception is as bad as it is and where this model actually lands. Let me know what y'all think. Until next time, peace nerds.